Welcome back. It's the Big Blue Banter, New York Giants football podcast. I'm Dan Schneier, joined as always my co-host Nick Filato. Been a little while since we came to you. It's a dead time for the New York football Giants right now. Let's just be honest with the situation. This is what happens in January.
Dead is kind of how we all feel right now, too.
Well, we all feel pretty dead about
Yes.
this team, but that should hopefully change. It's time of, free agency and the draft. Things can change. Things will change. Not necessarily will. They can change. The Commanders are a great example of how fast things can change. I mean, the Commanders last year, Nick, we'll talk about this a little bit today, and I'll preview in a second what we're going to talk about today. They won 4 games last year, Nick. They lost 13, and their point differential was over 100, negative over 100. Like, they were one of the worst teams in the NFL, if not the worst team in the NFL. And now they're in the conference championship game, and they just blew out the 1 seed, essentially. I mean, not blow out. They won by 2 scores against the 1 seed. It's a blowout. Like, that's how fast things can change in the NFL. It's not dead until
and
it's
a positive note with that, too, is how many wasted first-round picks did Washington have? Right?
Oh, yeah, so many. Emmanuel Forbes is cut. They just drafted him in the 4th round.
Exactly. So that's another thing Giant fans can look at and be like, see, they burned their picks and they were able to turn it around if you just get certain things correct.
If you get certain things correct. And what we'll talk about today, this is going to be a recap of just random news surrounding the Giants, and then we're going to do our thoughts on the divisional round, the NFL playoffs, the Commanders and Eagles matchup, a little bit of a preview, just talk about the conference championship, and then how those teams got here and what we can learn and what the Giants may be able to learn from that. We're also going to do a few other stuff later this week. We're going to do a podcast on first steps that Joe Schoen and Brian Dable can take this offseason to get this team back on track. And then next week, we're going to start some interesting stuff. I mean, we got Senior Bowl. We're going to talk about that. I don't think neither, at least as of now, neither Nick or I are planning to be there, though, which kind of deflates that a bit. Both doesn't work with our schedules from work. But so we're going to just start to do games. So like next week, I talked about this with Nick. We're going to do a Cam Ward game. We're just going to both watch the tape. We're going to evaluate it, and we're going to break it down on here. Just one game. We're not going to do our whole evaluation yet. That's going to come in late March, April, like it always does. We do our player profile. We had him last year on May and Jaden and all those guys. But we're just going to do a game. Just going to chart it. We're going to talk about it. I'm going to have my new system that I'm going to debut, a charting system for ball placement that I'm going to use and chart every single game that we watch of a quarterback this year. I'll have the little system for how I felt like they looked from a ball placement standpoint in that game. And hopefully it can quantify some things from a numbers standpoint. That's at least my goal. It's going to be a 1 to 5 scale from ball placement standpoint. I'll break it down in a further episode, but we'll do a Cam Ward game. I think we should start with his best game, Nick. We haven't talked about this, but I would love to do his bowl game. He was so on fire in that game. And I did watch a cut up of it this weekend. So I would love to do that game to start with the best. But yeah, we'll start to do games and we'll start to talk a little bit more draft as we roll through. But today we're going to talk a little bit about some stuff. So let's talk first, Nick, about some news that came out, not necessarily news. We maybe knew about it, but there's been discussion now that losing Xavier McKinney in free agency for the Giants, he signed a massive contract with the Packers, is going to lead to a compensatory draft pick for the Giants in this coming draft. Now, right now, the news around it is that it's looking like a 4th round pick the Giants will get in this draft for losing Xavier McKinney, but it might be upgraded to a 3. And that information is not yet to come out. The compensatory pick formula is kind of complicated, Nick. But this is good news. The Giants are getting at least a 3, maybe a 4 for McKinney.
Let's just hit it, right? Let's just actually get somebody like a Drew Phillips who provides utility and value to the New York Giants team. McKinney signed, a 4-year, $67 million contract with $23 million guaranteed. That's massive for a safety. And it's good that even though the Giants went out and they added Jermaine Illuminor, they added John Runyon, they added a few other pieces in free agency last year, they're still going to be compensated for the massive loss of Xavier McKinney.
You know what I'm looking for, Nick, for that pick that they're going to lose McKinney for, that they're going to get back from McKinney? I think it'd probably be a 4, maybe a 3. I was looking at the class a little bit yesterday, and I've heard about this now for 18 months. I've heard this term, Nick, but this is supposedly a very deep and loaded running back class. So I think your best bet in round 4 with that comp pick is take another Tyrone Tracy, get another talent in that running back room, get 2 guys that you can put on the field, you can play pony back, just get talent. Talent at the skill position is hard to find unless you're talking about running back. And in a deep loaded class like this, I will be pushing all offseason, Nick, for the Giants to invest one of their third, fourth, or fifth round picks at the running back position, because that's where you get value. We saw it with Tyrone Tracy. We've seen it throughout NFL history. It's there, and it's in a few other positions, but it's mostly at running back based on the devaluation of the position. And in a class as loaded and deep as this, I would love to get a playmaker, and I think it's going to be very possible with that comp pick. So we'll see what happens there. They'll go in a variety of directions. But some other news to talk about: the Giants actually hired a new coach. Jerome Henderson was out, and they hired a new defensive back coach. And Nick, tell us a little bit about their new defensive backs coach.
Yes, they hired Marquand Manuel, who I remember
a little bit from
playing.
Spain.
I remember him playing in the NFL back in the day. He's a 45-year-old who has his roots with the Seattle Seahawks during the Legion of Boom days. So he operated with Dan Quinn when he was a really young coach from 2012 to 2014, and then followed Quinn to Atlanta. And he was the secondaries coach there from 2015 to 2016 before he was promoted to defensive coordinator in Atlanta from 2017 to 2018. After that, he did not coach in 2019, Dan. Philadelphia Eagles defensive backs coach in 2020. And since then, he's been with the New York Jets as their safeties coach. And now he's getting this promotion. He's going to be the defensive back coach of the New York Football Giants. And he has projects, man. He has big projects because he has a lot of young moldable players. Some have shown promise, the rookies, Tyler Nubin and Drew Phillips. But then, obviously, the elephant in the room is Deonte Banks. What are you going to do about Deonte Banks? This guy needs to fix Deonte Banks, and I don't really have an opinion one way or the other if this guy can do that, but that is his task, and that more than likely will be what he is judged on overall, is just, can you get him back on track, Banks, that is, to his rookie form, which was, I would say, slightly above average, and we still haven't really seen what we believe Deonte Banks could be in the NFL quite yet.
Yeah, Tyler Nubin, Deonte Banks, Drew Phillips. It's a lot of young talent to work with, all drafted in the first 3 rounds of the NFL draft. So there's a lot of, that's as good as, if you're a DB coach walking into that, that's a good situation, especially when you consider there's a lot of growth that can be had with Nubin, with Phillips, and with Deonte Banks, who played well, or played fine, I think, during his rookie season. It's hard to play corner, but he played pretty damn good as a rookie in that Wink Martindale system that he was drafted to play, that he fit. Now, we always said he played good in zone 2, but he's not the type of corner that has ball skills. I think at this point we can kind of solidify that in. That doesn't mean he's a lock to be a bad player in the NFL. There are plenty of corners who have made it in the NFL without ball skills. Now, probably not nearly as bad as Deonte Banks as it seems at the catch point, but they've made it. We've seen this happen. So if you can unlock just his ability, because he's still, like, even throughout this year, Nick, where he wasn't that good, he stayed in phase a lot. Like, he's not the corner who's just getting toasted in coverage. We've seen, like, the Eli Apples of the world be left on an island and just get killed. He's not that corner. But, you know,
it's a very good point.
He still has to be, they have to find a way to have him become a consistent player in this Shane Bowen system. He wasn't drafted to play in the system, but this is the system that he has now. He's year 2. They brought in a completely different coach, running a completely different defensive system, going from Wink to Bowen, and that's what they're bringing back for year 3. So this is like, you can't just look at it like we drafted him for this coach and now he's here. That's not how it works in the NFL. He has to be good enough to play in both systems. And that's something I still think he can do. And then finally, in addition to that, maybe as a 4th young talent to mold, Jason Pinnock, another player who played much better in Wink Martindale's system than he did in Shane Bowen's system.
He is a free agent this year, though.
He's a free agent, and they might bring him back. They might not, but he clearly was a better player in the previous system.
He's an interesting one, and I kind of want to talk about Jason Pinnock because this plays right into Manuel, because Manuel was a safeties coach for much of his time. I mean, yes, he was a defensive coordinator with the Falcons, and he has a little bit of experience coaching corners, but he's a safeties coach. And I look at a player like Jason Pinnock. I think the Giants can get this guy for relatively cheap back on the roster. And I would be open to that, even though I would say underwhelming would probably be the best descriptive word for this 2024 season for Jason Pinnock, but that's also the entire New York Giants. So I don't want to just hold that to Jason Pinnock. If you can bring him with that, 6'1", 6'2" frame, broad player, physical player, a little bit wild, a little bit uncontrolled. But if you can bring him in and just have another coach in his ear, I'm completely open to that, because I think the Giants would be able to get him at a very cheap price. And I think there's still a lot of upside with a player like Pinnock.
Yeah, I'm not sure where I'm at on Pinnock.
He's like 24, man. He's a
young player.
He's young.
There are things I like about his game. I really liked him a lot more last year than this year as a player. But I think back to what I liked about him last year, and there were still concerns I had, specifically like as that safety coming down in the box, and as that safety who's kind of your last line of defense on short passes around the line of scrimmage, design screens, or even just run plays or regular screens. These are things that are used a lot at the NFL level at this point. I'm not so certain. I don't like the angles he takes. I'm not sure he's the sure tackler you need in that regard. And then the idea was, okay, well, look, he's an athletic specimen that's making plays in training camp in the passing game, but I don't see that, or we didn't at least see that during the regular season. So I'm not sold on him. I think if he's re-signed at cheap, fine, and you keep looking. You don't want to keep spending assets at the safety position. They just spent a second-round pick there. They just let McKinney walk. So it's an example maybe of them being in a position where they need to bring him back for now.
Yes, because as much as I like Dane Belton, I like Dane Belton in a specific role. And I don't think Dane Belton's a starting safety. I think you put Dane Belton in those sub-package roles on a Steve Spagnuolo coached defense where the offense is able to maintain a lead, then he can just use his ability to feel routes out and jump and undercut routes for interceptions. That's Dane Belton. And I think you can carve out a really nice career. But I don't trust Dane Belton that much coming downhill and filling the alley. Like Jason Pinnock, I feel like he did I don't want to say a poor job this season, but it was an underwhelming job is what he did in that specific role of filling the alley, especially given his physique and his physicality. And I think the upside that is there. But Belton, man, there's a reason why the Giants don't want to put him out there that often. And it's because he is somewhat of a liability in run support. Somewhat.
Good point. And I think back, you mentioning that brought me to like a point where I'm like, yeah, actually, when the Giants did start to get injuries at safety this year and Belton had to play a lot more, they looked a lot worse. So it is maybe a situation where they do kind of need Pinnock, and he brings them a baseline level with Newman in the game. We'll see what happens on that front. A few other notes and news that we'll get to before discussing Washington and the divisional round and the conference championship and the Eagles is Lou Anarumo, a guy who was rumored to maybe be in the mix for the Giants upgrading, I would call it, at defensive coordinator. It went to the Colts, so he's hired by the Colts as their defensive coordinator, which, by the way, came 2, 3, 4 weeks too late because this idiot Gus Bradley just cost the Giants the #1 pick, which is one of the most disgustingly bad games. When people blame Tommy DeVito, Nick, for the Giants losing out on Jaden Daniels or Drake May, I never think about it like that. I always just think about my blame goes to Sam Howell for the 6 turnover day against the Giants. Oh, really? Yeah. And then Mac Jones for his 2 turnover day, including that one he just like handed to Bobby Okereke in that game. And then the kicker for the Patriots. Like that's where my mind goes to. I don't never blame DeVito. He's going out there to play his best and win. And like, no, a lot of fans do blame DeVito. And they're just crazy fans, in my mind.
Well, they just want the first overall pick, and I get that. But Tommy DeVito is an undrafted. He has to do everything in his power to put good tape out there. I mean, I think those fans even recognize that, but they're just very frustrated. I don't want to speak.
They're frustrated. I respect that. And I'm very frustrated. Yes. And look, I'm definitely in the camp of where they're at. Like, there is no way in hell those DeVito wins were good for their long-term franchise.
Of course not.
It's not even a debate. Watch Jaden Daniels. The Giants would have had Jaden Daniels if those wins didn't happen. So just understand this in the future. If there is a really good quarterback prospect the Giants are in the mix for in a coming year and they're at the bottom of the standings, you could do what you want, but just know that like a win is not good for them, because if you lose, you get Jaden Daniels. And again, the Washington Commanders won 4 games last year with an over 100-point differential in their win-loss. Like they were one of the worst teams in the NFL. So it's not like you are like losing culture. They lost. Their culture was horrible last year, the Commanders. Yeah, it was horrible culture.
Absolutely. But you know what? It's not like Brian Daboll was interested in Jaden Daniels or anything like that.
Yeah.
It's not like we weren't put on.
There was no trade up to be had. That's the other thing. There will no be, if there's a good quarterback in this class or any class, no trade ups happen. The team just freaking takes them because that's what you do.
How freaking funny is it that John Mara has held off so long on the Hard Knocks thing, right? Mm-hmm. Did not want to do it. We were like, that uber conservative franchise are never going to do it. They're a legacy franchise. And then they do it, and they did it on quite possibly the worst offseason of just, you had all of these expectations and you failed them. And all of the discussions of Saquon Barkley and Xavier McKinney and all of this, they are now on camera for the entire world to see. And all of those decisions are just being absolutely destroyed by the broader NFL world. Like, you couldn't have picked the worst offseason to do this Hard Knocks. And the New York Giants were that team. And to me, it's just such a absolutely terrible situation for John Mara. And John Mara's I am never, ever doing Hard Knocks again. There's no way that guy is going to sign up for that shit.
If he was smart, he would have just done the stupid training camp one, because you don't lose any. You give away no information during the training camp.
I think it's just like people will view that as, I think they view that as a burden going into the season and a distraction when you're trying to like come together as a team and like be fundamentally sound.
Less of a distraction. Yes. Just pick the bad time during the franchise run to do this. If he had done this, It would have been interesting to see if he had done this the year of after the 2022. Imagine if that was the hard knocks for the Giants and we got to see the Daniel Jones contract negotiations and really happen there with Mara and the kind of, you hear about like 24th hour stuff with that negotiation, how Joe Shane was kind of hardballing it and kind of in the 24th hour, Mara, we've heard, came in and was like, let's just get this thing done. We got to get this done. And, when it ends up happening like that, the agent kind of gets everything they want, right? They get this massive contract. They get this injury guarantee in it, which means you can't even play him last year. Like the Giants probably would have just trotted Jones out for the rest of the year if they didn't have that injury guarantee because there's no real risk like involved. You're going to win games, but they're trying to win games. And it's like, okay, but if we play him now and he gets injured, we really F this thing up. So we literally cannot even afford to play him. Just a good job by that agent.
Just insane, man. Absolutely crazy that Saquon went off for $2K and he's playing in the NFC Championship game. And
we'll talk about that in a little bit.
Wild,
I have some thoughts on that. But yeah, so back to what I don't know how this came about. I think we were talking about just the hard knocks maybe with Giants or Lou Anarumo or what they're doing. But yeah, I don't know. But
we were talking about Lou Anarumo to the Colts and how the Colts, Gus Bradley screwed us over. And now.
Oh, yeah. That's just a long tangent from the Colts. Gus Bradley having just a horrific game that cost the Giants #1 pick. But we'll see what happens there. A few other things to discuss here. This is a fun one that I don't really care about. But, Daniel Jones and Sterling Shepard were at the Eagles game, I believe, cheering on Barkley. And then the week before, I think it was Malik Neighbors cheering on Jaden Daniels. Do you care about that stuff? A lot of fans are worked up about it.
No, not at all. I think again, though, it's just another blight on the New York Giants with the Daniel Jones, Sterling Shepard one, not necessarily the Malik Neighbors. He's just rooting for his boy. Like just because they're in this division, that doesn't really mean anything. I read nothing into that. I just say go and root for your homie. That there's nothing wrong with that. The Daniel Jones Sterling, like it does kind of seem like these guys aren't on the team anymore. They were like legacy Giants for a really long time, and now they're in Philadelphia rooting for their boy. And it's just like one of those things where it's just like, well, the Giants aren't there. But Saquon's there with Philadelphia. It's just another like cherry on top of just this absolute depressing nature that we all are inhabiting right now as Giant fans, seeing the Philadelphia Eagles possibly go to the Super Bowl with Saquon Barkley, who was a number 2 overall pick by the New York Giants back in 2018 and who never did this for the New York Giants. His best season with the New York Giants was that rookie year. And then outside of that, he was a good football player. We all knew he was a superstar, but he could never be fully maximized because the New York Giants couldn't get out of their own way.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I'm with you on that. I don't really hold it against any of those guys who are cheering on these friends of theirs. It's not. Look, it's a rivalry game, and they care about their rivalries just like the fans do, or not. I wouldn't say to the extent the fans do, but to some extent, they care about the rivalries. But the Giants aren't like if the Giants were an actual good team. Maybe this stuff wouldn't happen. Like, I don't know for necessarily, but like maybe, you wouldn't see Malik Neighbors because he would understand like what it looks like and I'm not saying him specifically, but any of these players and DJ and Shep, they're not even on the Giants anymore. So from their standpoint, they can just obviously do whatever the hell they want. Shepard is though on the Bucs. So it is probably not the great, I guess for Bucs fans, not the best look, but I don't think it matters. The last thing I want to discuss before we get into our thoughts on the divisional round in this conference championship matchup with the Commanders and Eagles, how they got here, what the Giants can learn, is the possibilities and where your thoughts are on this, because I know where mine is now, Nick. The possibilities of losing Mike Kafka to the Saints. Mike Kafka has a head coaching interview with the Saints. And Brandon, I believe it's a second interview. Yes, it's a second interview, which is an interesting sign that the Saints are at least somewhat interested in Mike Kafka. And then Brandon Brown interview with the Raiders to be their GM. There's some connection there potentially with Tom Brady, potentially with Shedeur Sanders. Now, based on both of their backgrounds.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. He's
Puerto
Rican, isn't he? Kafka
has something in
he's Puerto Rican, I think. Oh, yeah. So the Giants would get 2/3 if the
Giants would get 4 third-round picks.
4/3. You're right. It's too easy.
They lost Brown and Kafka. If this is still an unlikely scenario, but if Brown is hired by the Raiders and Kafka is hired by the Saints, the Giants are going to get 4 third-round picks for that.
Oh, bro.
I will take even 2 third-round picks. I respect the value added from Kafka. I'll start with him. I think he did a great job calling plays the first year. The second year, people think he didn't do well. I think it was just a shit quarterback situation. And then when Tyrod got in, they started looking good again. So I'm like, give him props for that. At least explosive plays. And again, it's not just explosive. Tyrod had the 8th best clean pocket EPA that year. Daniel Jones was 42nd or 41st, and Tommy DeVito was 42nd. So it's not just the explosive plays. He did more than that, Tyrod. But, and then on Brown's front, we don't really know what he does, Nick. it sounds like he's a good job. He does a good job in it. I kind of like him from that standpoint, but not really knowing what he fully does. Give me the 2 third-round picks.
100%.
Okay? And I'll take the 2/3 for Kafka too. This is where I'm at. I want my third-round picks. Those seem a lot more tangible to me.
Look, I'm not besmirching either of them. I'm sure they do a wonderful job, but these are excellent opportunities for each of these people to progress their careers. And the Giants are going to pocket possibly 4 third-rounders when both of these guys could be out of a job after next year anyways. Sure. I'd rather just, even though Joe Shane, I don't know, these third rounders, they don't all apply to this draft. Is that correct?
I think 2 would be this year, 2 would be next year.
And 2 would be next year. Yeah. Sign me up for this every day. And that, again, is not
plus the third, they might get for McKinney. They could have like 4 third-round picks in this draft.
Just that could help with the depth of the roster. You can land some gems, hopefully. You know, it doesn't seem like an overly likely thing given Shane's track record.
But he did get Theo, and
he got Drew
doing better. And Drew, he's been the idea.
I'm not putting Theo in the gem department quite yet, but I'm talking
not gem. I just like contributors. Never mind.
Yeah, we would definitely get contributors. Like Daniel Bellinger, that's a contributor that the Giants got. You know, Micah McFadden, that's somebody who was identified. So if you could add a bunch of those types of players where they might not be superstars, but they are competent players that you can rely on and plug on your offense and your defense, you can sign me up for that any day of the week. So I hope that would happen. I don't know how likely it would be for Kafka to get a head coaching job. That seems a little like a big stretch. You get
the
demoted.
Second interview, but it does. Yeah,
but he's like, dude, he is have you ever like listened to him on podcasts and stuff? Like he did the Spaces.
One time. I listened to him on a Space.
He's not overly charismatic, but like
he's
you can tell he is a very brilliant football mind. So
yes.
If you go in there, depending on what the Saints are looking for, I don't know what the hell the Saints are looking for at the moment. Like they're kind of a weird team, but dude, that would be amazing.
It's so interesting because it's like he is kind of a really brilliant NFL mind. You can tell that, but also I just feel like he probably is a better play caller than Brian Daboll, probably. And we're not going to get it's just weird how the Giants are just not going in that direction. Just looking at the full picture of everything, he's probably better. It's hard to say though. I mean, Brian Daboll called most of his plays this year without a quarterback.
It's hard for us to weigh in too, because again, we don't know exactly what's going on, but it has to be, I wouldn't say a toxic work environment, but an awkward one that Brian Daboll took over play calling, averaged 14.3 points per game until that Colts win. And Mike Kafka was like, I'm pretty sure I could have done a lot better than that. And you removed my play calling from me, especially when you also look at what happened with Wink Martindale. It just seems like maybe if he were to get that job, the Giants were to benefit. He would benefit from an upgrade, and then somebody else would get promoted to his role. It seems like that could be a win-win for all parties involved.
Could be. And I would say,
if Brian Daboll remains the coach and Kafka's not taking over what he used to do, I'm not trying to devalue what Kafka did last year, but obviously whatever he did last year wasn't really working anyways.
Right.
You know, and that's not to slight him. That's just because of the entire situation. So I think that could be replaced, and then the value of 2 third-round picks would be much greater than the value of Kafka on the roster for possibly one season where the Giants aren't going to win that many games.
Yeah, regardless, the value of those 2 third-round picks just seems exponentially more valuable to me, at least, and I think you as well. So I'm definitely hoping that one or both. I'm personally hoping both of these guys get hired away. I'd rather just the 4 third-round picks that the Giants are going to get for these guys.
And as for Brown, look, I would be very open to the Giants having Brown as their general manager. That did not happen this year. So now he's on staff for another season, and there's no guarantee that John Mara would give him the job if Joe Shane is fired next year. So you might as well just take the 2 threes right now and see exactly how it goes. Because Brown has been here, and I like Brown, but again, a lot of conjecture. We don't really know exactly what he does.
Exactly. That and like you said, they're probably clean house if they get rid of Shane and want a fresh restart. So it's not like they would probably hire Brown based on that. So it is a great time for hopefully those guys to get hired. I think the Kafka one's less likely. I think the Brown one has a shot, but I wouldn't even say it's likely at this point. I'd probably say it's so hard to tell with GM searches. I'd probably say it's at best like a 25-30% chance that Brown gets hired as the Raiders GM. I would say 10-15% maybe at tops for Kafka to the Saints. So we'll see what happens there, but we know where we stand. Let's wrap up by discussing the divisional round and then previewing Commanders, Eagles. And we want to talk about a few things while we do this, Nick, to wrap the show up. How they got here, what they have. And then I want to talk specifically on one thing, which is Bobby Johnson and the Commanders, and versus Carmen Brasil and the Giants, and versus Bobby Johnson and the Giants, because I have some thoughts on that personally, and I'm interested to hear yours. But let's first start by just touching on the divisional round. The Commanders, they went into Detroit. Now, a lot of people discuss this, and it's fine. The Detroit Lions, they're not the same team they were to start the year. But the fact, and they've got a lot of injuries on defense, but the fact of the matter is, Nick, like just 2 weeks ago, they destroyed the Minnesota Vikings defensively. Like they figured out a plan to beat Darnold and they destroyed him. Obviously, that plan doesn't work against Jaden Daniels. You can't really blitz this guy. You can't really do anything to this guy because he's so poised and calm in the pocket. But the fact of the matter is, they got absolutely obliterated defensively by the Commanders' offense in this game. I think they punted none or one time. So the Commanders even punt in this game. Commanders have so many games this year, Nick, where they just don't punt. That's how good Jaden Daniels is. They don't punt. There's no need to punt, and they go for it on fourth. I love the teams that say I'm going for it all game on fourth. I just love that, Nick, because again, if you have a player like Jaden Daniels who's so hard to defend on fourth, the only time they got stopped is when they did the Marcus Mariota dumb trick play and they took the ball out of Jaden Daniels' hand. Every time it's in Jaden Daniels' hand on those fourth downs, he makes it. He makes it because that's what happens. Like if you have a Mahomes, if you have a Jaden Daniels, I hate when the Chiefs punt on fourth personally or kick field goals. Like I would just always go for it on fourth. It's a cheat code to me. You're going to get them most of the time, and then you're putting it deep into their territory. It's not as bad as people think. All you're losing is 3 points off the board. But anyway, they destroyed them. They barely punted. The Lions offensively, they ran into some turnovers from Jared Goff. I think a fumble and 2 interceptions. Really good plays on the ball by a guy that we loved. I love Mikey Sammerstall in the draft. I thought he was a clear guy that you take in that draft just based on his ball skills. And those ball skills were on full display with the 2 interceptions in that.
They had 5 turnovers, Detroit. Like that's another.
That's how you lose. Yeah, it's the same reason Baltimore lost. By the way, on the flip side of things, on the AFC, this is Bill Parcells talked about it. It's what decides these games. But overall, I did feel like Washington dominated this game offensively.
They did dominate the game offensively, but 5 turnovers. I mean, you're just putting your defense right back out there because there were times like, dude, the defense came up with a massive stop on the first drive. Usually when that happens early and you're on the road, it's like hard to battle back. It just really goes to show you the grit and the toughness of Washington, but it also was really, it just helped so much by Detroit's inability to protect the football. Like that's my takeaway from it. It's just how reckless they were, because if you watch that first quarter, you saw Jahmyr Gibbs just finding creases and just going, dude, just driving the football right down the throat of Washington. I thought Washington was going to get cooked, bro. And then Jared Goff threw an interception. Jared Goff threw another interception. Jared Goff fumble. Jared Goff threw another interception in the 2-minute drill. And it kind of came down to Washington's defense making more plays than Detroit's offense, and just Detroit's offense being careless, which is something that they had not been for a very long time, because they were able to effectively and efficiently run the football, work the play action, find Amon-Ra, find Laporta, find Jameson Williams. And they were able to do that in this game, but not nearly to the degree that they needed to. So kudos to Washington, dropping 45 on the road, man. That's insane. Yeah. And the Commanders, I think, have won 7 in a row now. I think it is, dude.
Yeah, I wanted to unpack that, but the Commanders won 7 in a row. It reminds me in some ways of the Giants back in 2011 beating the Packers. The Packers were also a 15-win number 1 seed, just like the Lions, or 1-loss number 1 seed. I should say. I think it's 16 wins for the Lions. I'm not positive. I think it's actually 15-2, but a 15-win team. And they came in and they beat them by multiple scores. The Giants beat the Packers by, and same thing that Washington did in this one. And then I was saying, like, it would be funny if it matched up exactly with the 2011. They face a NFC West team on the road, but they're actually going to face the Eagles, so it didn't work out that way. But I'll say one thing: I think you're right, and I would agree with your overall assessment, just in the sense of you're probably right. That's the reason they lost. But I'll say this: in the second half, the Lions drove down and scored a touchdown, and it looked and felt like, okay, this game is over now. The Lions have figured this out. They're going to win this game. And Jaden Daniels responded with an 8-play, 70-yard touchdown drive right after that to put them back up by 10. And that was kind of what told to me that was the story of the game. It was, no matter what they did, they tried to fight back. There's just no stopping this Washington offense right now, for the Lions at least. The Eagles are going to have
15 play, 70 yards. Man.
Okay.
And that was after an 11-play, 91-yard drive by the Lions, by Goff. Yep. And then and you're 100% right. Like, Jaden Daniels, it was a great job. Brian Robinson ended up punching it in. And then 3 plays later, Jared Goff tried to hit Jameson Williams deep. And that's when Sanistrell jumped it and caught it. And then Jaden Daniels led an 8-play, 66-yard drive. It was at that point, it was a 45-28. I was like, holy shit, Washington's actually going to pull this one off.
Oh, they're winning. Yeah.
Which is crazy, man. The Lions found a way to shoot themselves in the foot.
Killed a lot of parlays from a lot of teasers for me, idiotic teasers that I did. That's why they call them a teaser. It's a sucker bet for a sucker like me. But that pissed me off. But yeah, but look, we'll talk a little bit more about the matchup with the Eagles and Commanders, but I think that's it for that. Now, on the other side of it, Eagles-Rams, that game, I thought...
That's exactly...
I know, because I thought there were moments I thought the Rams could win this game. The first drive, they kind of drove down and easily scored a touchdown. When they had the safety, I felt like things were changing maybe a bit. But, with the Eagles, it's been the same story and blueprint for them. At the end of these games, they've worn you down, and their O-line is so freaking dominant that eventually a crease will be created, and Barkley or Hurts, but it's mostly Barkley, will hit that and seal the game. And it's just kind of like every game, these offensive lines wear down these defensive fronts that they're facing, whoever it may be, the Rams in this one. And at times, like the Rams looked like they were setting a hard edge and doing good in the run game, but it's only a matter of time where they finally hit something, the Eagles, because the Eagles defense allows this blueprint. If the Eagles defense wasn't as dominant as it was, specifically Jalen Carter, who just idiotically fell to number 9 in the draft based on dumb character concerns, and now is like one of the best players in the NFL. If the Eagles defense wasn't this dominant, I don't think this blueprint would work. But it's fine. They have the patience. They don't need to press ever on offense. They never have to press, this team, on offense. They didn't have to press against the Rams. They didn't have to press against the Packers. Most games I've watched them this year, Nick, they've had zero press, zero moments of having to press. So eventually you wear them down and Barkley hits it, and that's kind of it for the Rams in this regard, I thought, at least. And even at the end, the Rams almost won. That's the crazy part. But yeah, man, my overall take was just that on that game. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it was the Rams' inability to fit the run and stop explosive rushes. You had a 44-yard touchdown by Jalen Hurts, 62-yard touchdown by Saquon Barkley, and then a 78-yard touchdown at the end of the game in the snow because the weather was just wild that day, man. It was going from just cold and rainy, and then it just started snowing like crazy, and you have a Los Angeles team trying to play in a hostile environment like Philadelphia. Kyron Williams fumbles the football, Matt Stafford fumbles the football, and this game was close for a while, and I wrote it off after that Saquon Barkley touchdown, and then kudos to Matt Stafford. 10 plays, 70 yards, finds Colby Parkinson for that 4-yard touchdown pass, bring it into a one-score game, but it was a little bit too little too late, but it was a pretty close affair. If Sean McVay's offense was able to actually be a little bit more efficient in the red zone and stop relying on these Cardi field goals, maybe this game could have been a little bit different. But you got Vic Fangio, man. Vic Fangio is one of the best defensive coordinators, and you have all of those defensive studs, and they're a young defense too, which is so annoying. New York Giants family. It is so annoying that players like Kenyon Mitchell, who ended up getting hurt in this game, but players like Jalen Carter and all these players, they're going to be there for quite a while, man. And they're a good unit, especially with Vic coordinating them. But yeah, the Eagles were the better team. But again, not to make the same point I did in the last game, if Kyron doesn't fumble that football, if Stafford doesn't fumble that football, this game could have went differently. And it could be the Rams and Washington right now, which would be so much more desirable.
It's hard to know, though, because, like, again, like the point I made, it's like the Eagles never had to press. So if they had to press, maybe they would have scored a touchdown. Maybe. I don't know.
If you have to press, now they could have just ran the football and it would have been fine because, I mean, the Rams gave up, 300 yards to Saquon Barkley when they met in the season. And then we saw what happened in this game with Saquon and Jalen Hurts. Right. So you may have been able to run the football. But my whole thing is force Jalen Hurts to beat you, bro. And if you could do that, if you could find ways to stop the run, if you can get a lead and then you put it on Jalen's shoulders, I think that's your best path to victory if you're playing against a team like the Philadelphia Eagles. And that's not a slight at Jalen, but Jalen's got an amazing offensive line. Jalen's got this exceptional rushing attack. The offense clicks on all cylinders, but we don't really see the Eagles playing from behind too frequently, do we?
No. And that's the whole point. They haven't had to press because of their defense. And I would even put it past, like, to me, Jalen Hurts looked great his Super Bowl year against the Chiefs. And he looked great in that game against the tough Spags defense. Absolutely, he was throwing with anticipation. He was hitting outs. He looked like he was working through progressions. It looked like him and Steichen saw on the same page. They've now had two different offensive coordinators in for the Eagles in these past 2 years. Kellen Moore obviously is a professional versus last year. They just had some random guy that, like, I don't want to call him a random guy, but it's a guy who was in over his head as a play caller. Truly, though. And that's what I worry about for the Giants or any team that just installs a random play caller. Like, even like the Lions are like, oh, we might make Mark Brunell now the offensive play caller. It's like, cool. On the surface, like, Mark Brunell was a great NFL quarterback. He probably is a great offensive mind. He was their quarterback coach and did a great job with Goff. But nobody knows if you can call plays. Like, you don't know until you actually see it, how the sequencing of plays, when to call what, and like in moments in big games. Like, that's all just like, you'll see it when they actually have an opportunity to do it. Point being, like, on the Eagle side, like, Jalen Hurts, to me, hasn't looked that good since that Super Bowl year. He hasn't looked anything like that at all, really, when I watch the Eagles. Now, they haven't had to press a lot, and he still can get that one-on-one ball. Like, he threw that ball up to A.J. Brown that should have been caught. It was a great throw by Hurts. He throws a nice outside over-the-top pass in one-on-one situations, always one-on-one with the safety never anywhere near, because you don't have to when you have Saquon Barkley and Hurts. You have to put these safeties around the box. But point being, like, I haven't seen it yet from Hurts this playoffs, this year, last year, as far as what he was doing that Super Bowl year from a passing standpoint. And that passing game, to me, it just doesn't operate the way a passing game should with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. Like, there should be inbreakers. There should be you guys torching the middle of the field, like with these insane athletes who can stop on a dime and cut back inside and create separation. And there just needs to be timing, but there don't seem to be having that timing in the passing game.
Yeah, Hurts was never really known for throwing over the middle
Agreed.
of the field.
Yeah.
And also the offense, like with the offensive structure, the defense does load that box, meaning there's going to be more bodies in the short to intermediate parts of the field. So outside the numbers, you can really take advantage of those one-on-one matchups with a player like Smith, who is an exceptional technician as a route runner, and then A.J. Brown, who could just bully you into the deck as a wide receiver against a cornerback. I'll say this too, man. The Eagles are 15-1 in their last 16 games. Now, one loss was against Washington. Now, they're 1-1. They split this season, Philadelphia Eagles and the Commanders. The Commanders beat them, Philadelphia beat them 26-18. And then about 4 weeks later, the Commanders beat Philadelphia 36-33 in that wacky and wild game. That was in Washington, though. So this should be a really interesting game. It's just, I don't want to put you on the spot here. All right. I want to ask all the Giant fans, actually. I think somebody tweeted a poll about this, though. Regardless. Who do we want to see in the Super Bowl, though? Because it's got to be one of these NFC East teams.
Oh, no.
I mean, I think it's easy for me.
Yeah.
It's Washington. But
Easy.
there is that part of me, though, that is like, I can't believe I have to watch a quarterback that the Giants were this close to getting. Take the Washington football team, Commanders, Redskins, whatever you want to call them, to a Super Bowl in his rookie freaking season.
Yeah.
And you were this close. That's tough. That is a tough freaking pill to swallow, but I just hate the Eagles so much, so I have to go with Washington.
I'm trying to do my best to turn over a new leaf in the sense of not looking back on things like that. It's hard, so hard to do for me, especially.
You're human.
Yeah. And I just have a really tough time doing it. Like, I've been thinking about them missing on Herbert for years, and I'll be thinking about them missing on Jaden Daniels for a lot longer, considering he's in the NFC. So I don't want to minimize that impact of that, but I hate the Eagles so much, and I'm disgusted with them and everything about them, and I don't want them getting a second Super Bowl with their franchise. Like, the one was annoying enough because it stopped me from having the jokes that I used to just crush Eagles fans with. Easy one. Look closely as I display the Eagles trophy case was a favorite of mine. And just like, what does an Eagles fan do when he wins the Super Bowl? He turns off the PlayStation. These are just classic jokes that you can bring out. You can't bring them out anymore. And look, I don't want them getting a second.
Love it.
Once they get a second, then it's like they're starting to creep up into the 3, 4, 5 Giants range. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you don't want them getting a second by any means. So I'd rather the Commanders get it or have an opportunity to get it with Jaden Daniels. It does suck that the Giants should have and could have had Jaden Daniels. Now, I don't mean should have in the draft. They had no chance to trade up for him. Just if they had lost those 2 games to the Redskins and the Patriots last year, they would have had him. So just that standpoint. And I don't know who they would have taken, May or Daniels, if they had the opportunity. That's something I'll never know, because I did hear from somebody who was on the Giants last year, no longer with the team, and now I feel okay to say it, that the Giants absolutely love Drake May. And when he would come in the offseason to train and to do his rehabilitation, they were watching May all the time, and he overheard so much of how much they loved him, just constantly in the building seeing him during the offseason. Now, that doesn't mean that didn't happen with Jaden Daniels.
On tape.
We already heard.
On tape.
On tape. Yeah, they were watching tape of May. And that doesn't mean it didn't happen with Jaden Daniels, just maybe not that day. And we already heard Brian Dable say, I would have traded up for Jaden Daniels. It seems like they love both of those guys. And Jaden is the one. Like, I think you can always say oh, I should lean on my pre-draft valuation where I had Caleb 1, and I don't know, I think you had Caleb 1 too. And I had Jaden 3 behind May. But after it's like anything in life. You don't just take lock. Like, people are saying you're supposed to take lock. Like, people online and some people on Giants Twitter are like, you have to stick with your take and you better be right. No, when more information presents itself, AKA we have no idea how these college quarterbacks are going to look in the NFL. The game is completely different. The freaking fast marks make the game completely different. And there's no way projecting the speed of the game, how these quarterbacks react to the speed of the game. We have now seen it. You can project it and you don't have to be right. How about you project it? You have your thing. You might be wrong. You might be right. And then when you see it, you change your mind because you're actually seeing what's happening. And we're seeing Jaden Daniels react to the speed of the NFL differently than May, differently than Caleb Williams. And obviously the systems are different. The situation's different, but the speed of the game, that's the number one thing you have to look for. How do they adjust to the difference in the speed of the game from college to the NFL? And clearly, Jaden Daniels has adjusted at a wildly different level than either of those two guys, Caleb or May. So clearly, based on that, I am making the distinction to say he is the best quarterback in this class. He's proving that right now.
Yes, I would agree. This episode is brought to you by Skims. Get your hands on the best underwear in the land. Look, I'm sure, gentlemen, you're a lot like me. You don't want your fit to be too compact, nor do you want to be swinging around like you're trying to destroy a piñata. You want everything in place. Comfort on a cloud with no ride-up. That is the ideal situation, and Skims provides that situation for us, gentlemen. They sent me a few pairs. I wear them to work. I wear them while I'm working out, and they are exactly what I'm looking for in my underwear. And Christmas is right around the corner. So grab a pair of Skims for someone in your life. Maybe that someone is you, and you want that comfortable underwear for your whole situation down there. So shop Skims Men's at skims.com. That's skims.com. Let them know we sent you. After you place your order, select podcast in the survey and select our show, Big Blue Banter, in the drop-down menu that follows. And if you're looking for the perfect gifts for the whole family, Skims just launched their biggest holiday shop ever. So visit skims.com to check that out and maximize your draw's comfortability. Hey everyone, this episode is brought to you by Manscaped, the global leader in men's lifestyle and grooming. Every man knows the unbeatable feeling of a fresh barbershop shave. Now, what if I told you that you no longer have to wait weeks or even months between appointments to experience it? Introducing Manscaped's newest innovation, the Chairman Pro Electric Foil Shaver, the game-changing tool that brings the luxury of professional shave right into your home. Whether you're after that daily silky smooth finish or prefer to maintain a rugged 5 o'clock shadow, the Chairman Pro Electric Foil Shaver is your go-to for precision and style every time. Head over to manscaped.com and join the over 11 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped by using code BIGBLUE for 20% off. Gentlemen, this has changed the grooming game for me, and I highly recommend it for you. Get the Chairman Pro today and experience a shave that is as smooth as you deserve. Get 20% off plus free shipping with the code BIGBLUE at manscaped.com. That's 20% off plus free shipping with the code BIGBLUE at manscaped.com. Yeah, of course you got to change opinions, man. You can't have take lock. You're not married to your ideas, bro. You know? Like, you have your own, you get new information, you adjust, and you change your perspective. It's a perfectly normal thing.
You're not always going to be right. You're going to be wrong a lot. You're going to be right sometimes. You're going to be wrong a lot. Like, that's kind of what this job is and what this business is. If you were right every time, it'd be the teams would never have Tom Brady in the 6th round. You would never have all these misses that you have in the NFL draft. Lamar Jackson went 30 picks in a draft class. Like, think about how ridiculous that is now looking at the NFL.
And even some of that is still so unpredictable because someone like Tom Brady, he didn't show signs of that necessarily at Michigan, but it's just like the person he was able to develop into the Tom Brady he became.
Yeah.
How do you quantify that just in like a 15-30 minute meeting that he's that person who's going to, because like a lot of other people, will work hard too, but they're not necessarily Tom Brady. Like, you really got to get in deep into like someone's psyche to figure out if they're going to develop into something or how they take code. It's very complex stuff when it comes to evaluating a player to see if they have whatever it takes to translate their skill set from college to the NFL. But then there's also just judging based on raw talent. And it was pretty freaking obvious watching the tape that Caleb, Drake, and Jaden Daniels all had that raw talent.
Crazy amounts of it. Yeah.
Crazy amounts of it.
Yep. And we'll see. And so far, Jaden's been able to develop it the best out of those three. Though I think,
but they're all also in different situations too. Which is like a whole nother thing. Like, pairing a certain coach with a certain player that could just be the perfect coach for that player. And then there's another player who may have had a higher upside, but he was paired with a coach that they did not see eye to eye, and then he was never actualized. Right. And then he ends up being a bust. But if he was paired with this other coach, he might have been a freaking stud. Like, there's so many different variables that go into one player maximizing his talents and maximizing his potential. In year one, Jaden landed in just the perfect spot. And I just can't praise him enough and praise Washington enough, which is crazy because a year ago we were like, screw this franchise. They suck. They're worse than the Giants. And here we are.
Right. And that'll be something we'll discuss in a few minutes when we discuss these teams. I have a little bit of a different take on that. I don't know how perfect this situation is. I think it's a good situation, maybe an okay situation for me. I'll make my case in a few minutes, but I think it's mostly Daniels in this situation. I think some situations are different, but I think this one is
Again, I think you're reading too far into what I'm like.
No, I know what you're saying. It's like the whole thing. It's not like his teammates. It's like just everything.
Well, yeah, it's also just like landing with the right coaches as the right things to you. Like, this isn't me taking anything away from Jaden. I agree that Jaden Daniels is the
No, I'm not saying
catalyst to what's going on with the Washington Commanders. My overall point, though, is certain players just when they're put around certain other people, that it clicks with them, right? And in other situations, it wouldn't necessarily click to the level that it clicks with them where they're at. And that's what I think is happening. I mean, that's obviously happening.
Yeah.
With Jaden. Like, I don't take anything away from Jaden.
The best case for that is Cliff, because I think Cliff has done an incredible job. And
Cliff has done a great job.
Cliff well.
Yeah.
But then there's like other aspects of it, like Bobby Johnson, for example, he chastised a lot with the Giants for the job he did, and now he's their offensive line coach for the Washington Commanders. And I mentioned this on a previous pod, Nick, but the same player I talked to about who made the mention of the May said that when I asked him about the offensive line situation, he said, no, Bob Johnson's a good coach. It's not his fault at all what happened. And a lot of people have echoed that, like analysts and people outside the situation, been like, it's the talent. It's the players that were playing. It wasn't the coach. But I look at this team, and I think this is a great example to me, the best example I've seen in all the NFL this year and probably quite some time of the Q quarterback impacting the pass protection and the quarterback impacting the run game and the run scheme. Like the way when I watch Jaden Daniels, the reason the Washington offensive line looks good is him for the most part. It's Jaden Daniels, both on the offense, the passing game, and the run game. So, like, that's an example of, like, did he land in the perfect situation with Bobby Johnson and these barely talented offensive linemen? Like, Coleman's having a good rookie year for sure, but now Cosme's out, and, like, he was their best player outside of him. And it's like, no, I think Jaden Daniels is the reason why this is happening.
Yeah, I'm not disputing.
And I know you're not saying
all,
that.
Dude.
No.
I hope, like, I think we're having two separate conversations.
Very two separate. I just want to. I'm making the point here, like, because exactly like with Caleb or with May, May dealt with the most pressure at dropbacks thing of any quarterback. He did not do a great job in my mind of making his offensive line better. And I would say the same thing for Caleb Williams.
I think it's broader than this, though, dude. Like, I think it's much broader than, like, yes, you're correct. Jaden Daniels is getting the most out of his offensive line, but I think that running scheme and just the system in general,
that's the Cliff part.
It's the Cliff part. It's the coaching part. It uplifts everything that Jaden Daniels can do. Whereas Drake May's coach was fired in year one. Drake May was in a really bad situation. Now, I think talent-wise, Washington has a little bit more talent on their offensive line than New England, but it's not like the best offensive line in the world. But when you take every variable and every factor and you apply it to what was going on in Washington, and this is not taking anything away from Jaden Daniels, but they were able to maximize that prospect. Whereas Drake May is just sitting back there like a sitting duck in a lame duck situation with a coach who was already fired. And now he's going to be with Mike Vrabel running the football like 50 times a game, which is like, it's going to be an exciting time, I guess.
Yeah. Well, now they hired Josh McDaniels, which really concerns me. And I'll just, I'll tell it point blank. When I have a conviction on a player, I haven't had a conviction on a player in so long, like a true conviction. The one I had on Drake May, like goes back to the first game I saw him play in the AC as a true freshman. I knew what I saw, in my mind at least, was special. And I thought there was moments of special. And then I watched almost this whole freshman season live as it unfolded, and I was betting on it. And I was like, this is a special prospect. I'm always going to be invested in him his whole career based on that, Nick. And he's not in our conference or division, so I don't feel bad rooting for him. I am nervous about this mesh up with Josh McDaniels. This is such a completely different system, complex, different verbiage. I personally don't think it really fits his skill set best. I think like a Bruce Arians system would be perfect for Drake May. If you could get him in a Bruce Arians system, like if you could convince Bruce to come back, which you can never do. But like that's what fits his skill set. I am not really loving this idea of Drake May in a Josh McDaniels system. We'll see what happens there, though. It's not important to the Giants. Now back to the Commanders and Eagles. But it goes to your point, by the way, of how the system plays a huge role. And I do think it's played a huge role with Jaden Daniels. To me, it's bigger than the Bobby Johnson or the offensive line or his weapons or whatever it might be. It's really just the job that Cliff has done to mesh with him. Now, as for this game, Samuel Cosme out for this game. Kenyon Mitchell, probable, I think, even though it looked like he was out. Jalen Hurts, who knows if he'll be 100%. If he's not, that could really help the Washington Commanders if they're able to crash on zone read and just go after Barkley and leave Hurts kind of unalone. Or basically, that's how but if I was DC of the Commanders, Nick, my game plan would be we're crashing every zone read to start and we're basically giving Hurts a free run because I want to see if he's willing to do it. And I want to see how he's going to go about running with his injury. Like, is he going to go all out to take it? We may give up a big play by doing this, Nick, but we're going to force him to put his knee on the line on a big run and see how it goes. And if he's 100% healthy and he looks good on that run, we adjust our game plan and we start to not crash as aggressively. And, we respect it, but make them show that first. I don't think the game plan should be normal, like this is normal Jalen Hurts. Make him prove that he's still that runner in this game from a health standpoint. But with those injuries, with everything, what is your initial feel on this game? The Washington Commanders are 6-point dogs.
I think they could play spoiler, man. But like if I had to pick, I think Washington would cover and Philadelphia wins.
That's how I probably lean.
I think it's gonna be a close game.
I'm close on that. I think the Washington's going to cover, and I'm close on thinking I'm betting Washington money line, and I'm feeling like Washington will win this game. I think the Cosme injury sucks for them. I think Jalen Carter is a dominant player playing dominant football right now, and that's really bad for them. Yeah. And I think it's so interesting to look at how these two teams got here, Nick, because it's really, to me, close as you can get to a total opposite situation. Now, while saying that, again, I am giving credit to Cliff Kingsbury and the meshing of this system. But for the most part, when I watch the Commanders, it's just Jaden Daniels. And Terry McLaurin's great. And out of nowhere, De'Ami Brown is great because of Jaden Daniels. Out of nowhere, this offensive line is great because of Jaden Daniels. Bobby Johnson is great because of Jaden Daniels and Cliff Kingsbury. I want to make that clear. He deserves to be in that. But then I look at the other side of this matchup, Nick, and it's like I look at a team that's kind of in a lot of ways, with the exception of the ability to run zone read because of his athleticism and his playmaking ability in general when things break down, a team that's winning not in spite of the quarterback, but in a lot of ways in spite of the passing game for the Eagles. They didn't generate almost anything these first two games from a passing standpoint outside of a few explosive plays. There's just no rhythm, no timing in this passing game. You don't see, like, even what you talked about earlier, Nick, like, look, if we're getting mugged up boxes where there's safeties around the line of scrimmage and everything in the short, intermediate, middle is taken away because there's so many bodies. At least why are we not seeing like back shoulders with Jalen Hurts, right? Or out routes? Like, he doesn't throw those either. Like, there's just not a rhythm or timing to this passing game. And yet they're here. They're favorites. We expect them to win because they just dominate the trenches on both sides of the ball, the Eagles, and then have talent everywhere else. And it's like no quarterback, but maybe I shouldn't say quarterback, no rhythm passing game, but talent everywhere else, plus the dominant trenches. And so they're in a lot of ways winning. I don't want to say in spite of the quarterback, but inside of the passing game.
Yeah, exactly. They don't need that explosive passing attack. We've seen Jalen Hurts, AJ Brown, and Devonta Smith do their thing now. We know it's capability that they have, that they possess.
Seems like it's big plays though, Nick. Like, it doesn't always.
It is a lot. It is a lot of big plays. That's what they rely on. They have big play receivers though too. Like they're like,
I feel like these guys could also be 10 catch guys in a good system.
I agree 100%, but they don't need that right now. Yeah. They can rely on that offensive line. They can rely on running the football. They can rely on the tush push. They can rely on more maybe low upside plays, but just low very low downside
risk,
plays.
Right?
Yeah, low risk. Yeah, just very low risk type of football. When you have a player like Saquon, he can create those explosive plays, and we know they are good for some explosive plays, as you just said, in the passing attack when Jalen does want to uncork it and let it rip. So I can see an upset from Washington, but I think if like I had to bet on this, I would bet them to cover the spread and Philadelphia to win by like 3 or 4 or something like that.
Yeah. I would say, and just like
it could be a shootout though, dude. Like it wasn't what was that, week 15, week 16, and that's I think the path to victory. If Washington can just be efficient
to play that,
because I think they punted like twice. Washington,
it's so cold though, probably, which is not good for shootout.
Oh, and he's a warm weather. I mean, he can do it, Jaden, but he's a warm weather guy. Arizona State and LSU, dude. Like,
I have such a bad take that I'm afraid.
I'll put it out there. Don't be a coward.
I am more. This is such a bad take. It's going to get crushed, but it's how I feel.
Love it.
I am on the Kurt Warner train that I wish every NFL game was played in a dome.
Oh,
I don't like.
I don't think that's a bad. I don't think it's a bad take. I don't agree. I don't agree, but I don't think it's a bad take.
It's a bad take because a lot of people would call it a bad take, and because football is played outdoors and the elements are part of the game. But when you hear Chris Long, I heard him on a podcast this week. He's a former player. He's a smart, knowledgeable person.
Yeah.
And every NFL player who's kind of been asked this, Nick, say that the best team doesn't always win when the conditions become a factor. That just doesn't feel like the right play for me. Like, I'd rather the best team win. I'd rather the conditions not play a huge role in who's winning or losing football games. Like it really felt like they did. Like I felt like if that game was played in the Dome, the Rams might win. I think the Rams win that game in a Dome. Even if you have the Eagles fans there, I just felt like
I agree, dude.
that's how it looked to me. Now, maybe Hurts, if he was in a Dome, would throw better and they would be, have a chance to throw more. Or they would need to throw more.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean that that's how it should play out because the Eagles earn that advantage, I guess. But what if the Eagles were like the Rams team and the Rams were like the Eagles team? And Kurt Warner's whole point is like, it's not fair to us because I play in a dome all year in Arizona and I don't get to prepare for those conditions. And then they, get to prepare. But to me, it's like, well, then earn the bye or whatever, or then earn the seating so you can play at home. That part I care less about. I just want the best product and the best team to win. And I think you have a better chance of seeing that happen in a dome.
And we know that the NFL's cognizant of this with the Super Bowl. Like,
right. Never bad. Well, it was with the Giants, but it's very rarely bad weather in MetLife that year.
It's the MetLife game. Yeah, that's very rare. So they are aware of it. And I don't think that's a terrible take. I tend to be that football purist, smell my own farts type of thing where I'm like, oh, no, you're playing the elements and you guys got to suck it up. But I was watching that game and look, Puka in the first half, I was like, yeah, he is uncomfortable. There were certain Rams players. I was like, this guy is not enjoying his life right now. He turned it on in the fourth quarter and made a couple big catches. But I think, if that game was played in a neutral site where there was a dome, the Rams might have defeated Philadelphia.
I think they really might have. It just kind of goes to show like this Philly team is vulnerable, man. Like
I agree.
They might end up winning the Super Bowl. They're currently the favorites to win the Super Bowl, which is frustrating. But man, they're not what I think some people. I don't personally think they're what some people think. Like, they're a dominant trenches team. Awesome. And Barkley is explosive player. Awesome. But like they're not blowing out teams. They're not like commanding wins. They don't look that good to me on offense in general. Like Jalen Hurts drops back, and I feel like a lot of the time, Nick, he's standing there and then takes a sack, or is just not finding solutions really, and then scrambling. Like it just doesn't look in rhythm at all to me. This offense.
Yeah, man.
They may not need to be
dejected, man. I'm just so dejected.
No, I get it. And they're probably going to win this game and then maybe win the Super Bowl, which sucks.
I got an Eagles fan friend who's like talking shit, and I don't talk shit. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, dude, it's like I have a pot. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm like, you're doing your thing. You're talking. That's fine. But he like brings up stupid shit like, oh yeah, last 20 years we've owned everything. I'm like, bro, the Giants have doubled the amount of Super Bowls you guys have in your entire history in the last 20 years.
Yes.
Like, what are you even saying? Like, what are you putting out there? And then he's like, oh, when was the last time you guys won your Super Bowl? They're like, oh, 7-11. And then he like sat there like, I guess you're right. I'm like, yeah, no shit. You guys have one Super Bowl. Like, sit down. You guys will win another and still only have half the Super Bowls we have. So, like, just silence, please.
Yeah.
Respect, please.
I get it, but it's also recency bias, and it's also like, what have we done? What have you done for me lately? I think I would wrap the show up by saying, to me, from an outside standpoint, I'll get your take on this, and then we'll end it there. How these teams got here. The Eagles, to me, got here by constantly, it's obviously part of what they got here is great management and great draft evaluations in times. They've had draft misses too, though. But main reason, and great development, I should say, on both sides of the ball, specifically the offensive line with Stoutland. But one thing that's been true for the Eagles throughout the last 10, 15 years of just us following this thing is they consistently invest in the trenches. It doesn't matter where they're at. They will draft offensive and defensive linemen. They did not need Landon Dickerson when they spent a second-round pick on him. They did not need Juergens when they spent a mid-round pick on him. They did not need Jalen Carter at the time when they drafted Jalen Carter. It doesn't matter about need. They're not drafting for need. They're not trying to match skill with need. They're not trying to match that the way the Giants have basically done under Shane. They're just taking the best player overall, especially if it's trench player. And they are putting an onus on getting trench players in the first and second rounds early and often. Constant draft picks and investments in the first, second, and third rounds on the offensive and defensive line. To me, that is the story. They've traded for A.J. Brown. They did one big investment in Devontae Smith, a skill player. The Brown was just a trade, which I guess you can call the same kind of investment. They're taking Kenyon Mitchell now and types like that because they can afford to. But constantly, they've invested in the offensive and defensive lines.
100%. I think that's a great takeaway. And I love the fact you brought up the draft misses because I think it's really important when you look at the current state of the New York Giants, because the New York Giants have also had a lot of draft misses. Look, they've acquired talent every single way. They've signed them with Saquon Barkley. They traded for them with A.J. Brown, and then they drafted them with guys like Jalen Carter. And they also had a quarterback for a while named Carson Wentz that they gave a massive deal to, and they found a way out of it and selected Jalen Hurts in the second round. And while Jalen Hurts is not the catalyst to this team's success, he is still a part of it, a big part of it. And I feel like people in that locker room, at least in the past, did rally around him, and he is the leader of that team. I think Saquon also bears some of that burden. But my overall point is, man, you drafted Jalen Reagor in the first round over Justin Jefferson. Massive miss. Andre Dillard dealt with all those injuries. That was a first-round tackle that ended up being a massive miss. They've had their first-round busts. They've had players that they drafted like J.J. Arcega-Whiteside in the second round who didn't really do anything for them. Howie Roseman has had his misses, but he's found ways to get out of them and then identify the talent, bring them in, and then they were groomed properly by the coaching staff. Having someone like Jeff Stoutland will obviously help that with the offensive line, but it goes to the old saying, man. If you have strong trenches on both the offense and the defense, you're set. You're good. It all starts there. And I think Philadelphia embodies that. But then you also look, they have a top 5 wide receiver, arguably. They have a top 5 running back. I wouldn't even say arguably, definitely. And their quarterback, I would say, is what? Top 15, probably.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So you can win like that. He's around that, I would say.
Top 15. I think. He's definitely top 15. No, he is. He throws good over the top. He makes more plays than Giants fans realize and give him credit for. I know a lot of fans are down on him, and I'm not a huge fan, but enough of a fan. But let me say this. The Eagles are a good example. It would take time and it would take really good management and really good development, all the things you just mentioned, Nick. But they are a good example of a team, in my mind at least, that's found a way to be a pretty consistent force. That what if we always talked about, Nick? You and I have always wanted to set a bar higher than Mara and what some Giants fans said it, which is, yay, we made a wild card one year and then we don't the next. Or like, oh, we're back in the wild card. We want a consistent division winner is what we always have said. And that a consistent division winner gives you a chance to be consistent Super Bowl contender. And they've built that with what you just said is probably only a top 15 quarterback. And that's something that we've always discussed. How do you do this? Is there really any way around it besides having one of these elite quarterbacks? The Eagles have proven there is a way around it, building a consistent winner. There really is. And I don't want to even just say elite quarterback. Let's say it in a different way, Nick, because I think Hurts offers some things to their offense and to their team that aren't necessarily that aren't necessarily what I'm going to talk about. So I'm going to say, when I say that, I mean you can build a consistent winner without having an elite passing game. I think that's the better way to describe it, because Hurts offers stuff in the run game. And let me make it more specific, without building an elite timing and rhythmic passing game. Because again, he does make some big plays on throws too, when he throws those over the top one-on-ones to Brown or to Smith or whatnot. But, they're really the only example of this, because people say the Niners, but I don't agree with that, because Purdy throws the anticipation and keeps that offense in rhythm all the time.
Here's another stat. So since 2021, the Eagles have had 13 first, second, or third round picks. Wow. 8 of them were spent in the trenches.
Yep, that's what they do. That's what Roseman does. I mean, this is the blueprint. He's going to invest his major picks in the defensive and offensive line, and it's why they're dominant in both those areas right now, and it's why they're winning despite not having a rhythmic passing game, which is hard to do. It really is hard to do. It's great. Like we talk about this, they're hosting a conference championship game, 6-point favorites, without really clicking at all in the passing game. It seems like they're making explosive plays occasionally, but they don't click really at all.
No, I know. It's interesting. I hope they lose, man. I do.
I hope they lose too. It's going to be, it's a totally different scenario as far as how did the Washington get here. We can touch briefly on that and then close out here, Nick. A lot of people give them credit. I know a lot of people I respect give them credit to all these changes they made in the offseason. But, my perspective from watching these games, watching a lot of Commanders and all the playoffs, is those changes happen for sure. But are they really as impactful as people claim them to be? The new ownership, the new GM and the new head coach, long term, sure they are. But and Bobby Johnson, and I kind of feel like this is a combination of what we talked about earlier. Jaden Daniels, Cliff Kingsbury, and then I want to give credit to Dan Quinn, because he doesn't have much talent on defense, but he just is getting them to do enough to help them win games, right? It's mostly just the offense, and then Dan Quinn comes up with a big stop or a big sack here and there, and they're finally starting to click and understand his system a little bit better. But mostly it's just the offense. They don't punt really, and they score a lot, and Jaden Daniels makes a shit ton of plays and makes his O-line look a lot better. So it's mostly, to me, that's how they built this thing. I guess people are giving them credit for all the changes they made, none of which, and I mean this, Nick, none of the changes they made this offseason, signing Austin Eckler, Bobby Wagner, new coach, new GM, new ownership, they would have been a 4 or 5 win team if they didn't get Jaden Daniels in this draft class. And I stand by that, and I will fight that to my death.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that's a hot take at all.
But to me, it minimizes the impact of those changes. It minimizes.
No, it doesn't. No, it does. I mean, I don't agree that it does. I mean, I think those changes have allowed Jaden Daniels to, again, maximize who he is and get him to the position to where he's actualizing his best version of himself on the football field. Getting guys like Eckler and Wagner, and that helps solidify the locker room. This is a 23, 24-year-old kid stepping into a locker room with grown-ass men with families and stuff like that.
Yeah.
He has the leadership qualities. Everyone has, who rallied around him, but giving him that infrastructure to thrive is massive, dude. Like that's massive in my opinion. And that's how I look at this. This is a very collective thing. Yes, Jaden Daniels, to use his word again, is the catalyst to the success, but he needs all of these ancillary pieces and variables to also help uplift him, and they all are.
Agreed. And I think they are. And I think a lot of the reason they are is because of him, if that makes sense. We've talked about this a lot.
Yeah.
People play better when they have a feeling of, oh my God, this might happen because of this kid, Jaden Daniels. And the reason I bring this up, Nick, is just to say, like, a lot of Giants fans are saying, like, no, it's not just if we can find a Jaden Daniels, we're going to be good again. Look at all these other things Washington did. I just don't agree with that. I think mostly it's they found Jaden Daniels and he made players play around them. These things all helped them for sure, Nick. They did.
Absolutely, yeah.
But at the same time, you get quotes this week, like Vic Fangio is like talking about the game. He's like, on tape, I've been in this league for a while. On tape, I've never seen a rookie quarterback play better than Jaden Daniels. Ever. He's talking about this dude's been around for some of the most elite quarterbacks in NFL history. He's never seen a quarterback. And why is that? Because when he gets the ball on a drop back, he's processing the defense at a crazy rate. He's calm and poised all the time, and he's finding solutions with his eyes and with his feet and with his mind and with his arm.
He's
and
great.
Like, Vic Fangio literally said he's the best rookie quarterback he's ever seen on tape. It's crazy. Like, that is, yes, they added all these guys. They're helping for sure. But it's like, without Jaden, and Jaden's kind of the reason they're playing better, in my mind at least, none of this happened. So to me, it's a totally different build than the Eagles. They did the quarterback route.
100%.
It's also not replicable, really, because do we really think that Jaden Daniels is going to come out in the next 10 years? It's not likely. Even with guys like Arch, it's not. No, I don't think that's fair to say it could, because if Fangio's right, and this is the best rookie quarterback he's ever seen on tape, you're not going to just get that next year or the year after that or the year. You know what I mean? Like,
well, we don't know. I mean, it's tough to say, but I
Yeah.
think your overall point is it's unlikely to find
Very
someone
unlikely.
who is that extraordinary.
Who has been, the rookie quarterbacks we've watched, Nick, in recent memory, who's been as poised and looked as just finding solutions all the time as Jaden Daniels has?
I don't think there has been one. I don't think there has been one. It's remarkable.
Luck.
It really is.
Is it Luck?
Well, Luck was very.
I don't remember his rookie season. Was it really good?
2012, yeah.
Okay, so it might have been Luck.
But I mean, I don't think it was like this. I think it's a little bit different. Luck seemed a little bit like like he was calm and he was taking hits and he was tough as nails. But like Jaden, it is odd to see him play because he's just smiling all the time. He goes to the bench and he's literally just chilling there. He's like, oh yeah, I guess I got to go on a touchdown drive. It doesn't seem like anything bothers this kid. He truly is very incredibly unique. And I'm very upset about it. But like I'm happy for him. But yeah, he's just a wonderful prospect, man. A wonderful player, I should say, at this point.
Two totally different routes for these teams to get to the conference championship, and two options for the Giants. And we'll discuss kind of different ways the Giants can get back into this thing in a future pod. Thank you so much for listening to Big Blue Banter Pod. Please support us during the offseason, especially we need your help. Hit the like button right now if you haven't already. Please leave a comment, talk Giants football with us. We'll do a mailbag soon too. We should do that coming up next week. Just try to get this page rolling again. I do appreciate everyone who's supported us, especially throughout the offseason. It's a little bit of a dead time for football and Giants specifically, so we can use your help the most now. And big things are coming ahead. We're going to have free agency and then a ton of draft content. So keep it locked and loaded. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll talk to you soon.